The wind off the Atlantic was cool that morning, brushing against Claire Bennett's skin like a whisper from the past. She stood on the weathered wooden pier, hands curled around a paper cup of coffee, staring out at the horizon where the sun was just beginning to push its way through the clouds. Her hometown of Haverhill Bay was quiet at this hour, too quiet for someone used to the constant hum of city life. It had been 8 years since she left. 8 years since she had sworn she'd never set foot in this town again. But life, in its relentless unpredictability, had a way of circling back. Her return wasn't planned. It never was, not really. She'd come back because her father had fallen ill, and now she found herself in the very place she'd once run from, living in the old Bennett house with its peeling paint and creaking floors, walking streets where every brick seemed to hold a memory. And some of those memories hurt. She took another sip of her coffee, willing herself not to think of him, not to think of Jake Carter, the man she'd loved with the kind of reckless abandon that only belonged to youth, the man who had once promised her forever, and the man she had left standing in the rain the night she drove away. The sound of footsteps broke through her thoughts. She turned, and there he was, Jake Carter, wearing the same easy confidence he always had, except now there were faint lines around his eyes, and his hair was a shade darker with hints of silver. Tom had been kind to him. Too kind. "Claire," he said, his voice warm but carrying an undercurrent of something she couldn't name. Her breath caught. "Jake." For a moment, neither of them moved. The air between them seemed charged, heavy with the weight of what had been left unsaid for nearly a decade. "I heard you were back," he said finally. "Didn't think I'd run into you this soon." "I'm just getting some air," she murmured. "Needed to clear my head." His eyes searched hers, as if trying to read the truth beneath her words. "How's your dad? Stable for now?" He nodded, and silence fell again. She noticed the way his hands flexed at his sides, like he wanted to reach for her, but was holding himself back. Claire wasn't sure whether she wanted him to step closer or turn away. That night, she couldn't sleep. Every sound of the waves crashing outside her window reminded her of the nights they'd spent lying on the hood of his old Chevy truck, staring at the stars and talking about all the places they'd see together. She remembered the feel of his hand over hers, his quiet laugh when she said something ridiculous, the way his eyes softened when he looked at her. She'd tried for years to forget it all, but now, with him just down the road, it was impossible. The following week, she saw him again, this time at the local diner. She'd slipped into a corner booth, thinking she could get her breakfast without drawing attention. But Haverhill Bay was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone's business before you did. Jake walked in, spotted her instantly, and after a brief hesitation, came over. "Mind if I join you?" She almost said yes, "I mind," but instead, she nodded. They talked, or at least, they tried to. At first, it was the polite, surface-level conversation of two people pretending their history wasn't sitting between them like a third person at the table. But as the minutes passed, the walls began to crack. "Why'd you really leave, Claire?" His question was low, but his gaze didn't waver. She swallowed hard. "You know why?" "Do I?" Her throat felt tight. "I had dreams, Jake. Big ones. And this place that felt like it would swallow me whole if I stayed." His jaw tightened. "You could have taken me with you." Her heart twisted. "I was scared you wouldn't want to go. And I couldn't watch you resent me for dragging you away from the only home you've ever known." For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then, quietly, "You never gave me the chance to decide." Days turned into weeks, and they kept running into each other. At the grocery store, on the beach, outside the library. Each time, the conversations went a little deeper, and the silences between them became less about pain and more about possibility. One evening, a storm rolled in from the sea. The wind howled. The rain pounded against the windows, and Claire found herself standing in her living room when she heard the knock. Jake was at her door, drenched, hair plastered to his forehead. "Figured you shouldn't be alone in a storm," he said, stepping inside before she could argue. They ended up sitting on the couch, a blanket draped over both of them, the glow from the fireplace casting flickers of gold on his face. "Claire," he began, his voice low and steady, "I spent years trying to hate you for leaving, but I couldn't. Every time I thought I'd moved on, something would remind me of you. A song, a smell, the way the ocean looks at sunrise." She felt her chest tighten. "Jake." He leaned closer, his eyes locked on hers. "You were it for me. You've always been it. And if you're here, if there's even the smallest chance, I need to know if you still feel it too." Her answer came out in a whisper. "I never stopped." The words seemed to break something in him. He closed the space between them in one swift movement, his hands cradling her face as his lips met hers. The kiss was everything. Years of longing, regret, and unspoken love poured into one moment. When they finally pulled back, their foreheads rested together, breath mingling in the quiet. The storm raged outside, but inside, something had shifted. Something had healed. And just like the tide that always came back to shore, so had they.